Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. We're just giving the participants a chance to sign on. Buenos días a todos. Vamos a dar inicio en unos minutos. Estamos dando la oportunidad a los participantes a llegar a la reunión Zoom. Welcome to everyone. Bienvenidos. My name is Andy Carey. I'm the Executive Director of the U.S.-Mexico Border Philanthropy Partnership. We have an exciting presentation today for all of you titled Measuring and Sharing Your Program's Impact to Attract Funders. This is a part of a 6-part series with our friends and colleagues and partners at Candid. Today, we want to express our gratitude to David Holmes and Lori Goudry for their wonderful participation. Additionally, we want to welcome Melissa de la Peña, who is serving as our interpreter today. We also want to thank Fundación para la Beneficencia Jesús M. Montemayor for their generous support for this project. Earlier this year, we launched, in collaboration with our friends at Candid, Funder Information Network libraries across the U.S.-Mexico borderlands. They are based in Mexicali at the Universidad Autónoma de Baja California, in Ciudad Obregón at the Centro para Formación Social, in Ciudad Juárez with our good friends at the Fundación Paso del Norte para la Salud y el Bienestar, in Monterrey, Nuevo León at the Universidad de Monterrey, and here in San Diego at the U.S.-Mexico Border Philanthropy Partnership offices. Our mission is to support a network of organizations that build prosperity through leadership, collaboration, and philanthropy in the borderlands. Today adds another mark in our work for that to happen. We welcome the participation of our member network. Your support of our work is inspiring. To those of you joining us today that are not yet members, we invite you to do so. Your access to more programs and services awaits you, as well as unlimited virtual access to the Funding Information Network directory, as our members get access unlimited. Welcome to all, and thank you. We hope you enjoyed the session today. Muchísimas gracias. Lori and Dave, welcome.
Thank you so much, Andy. We really
Yes,
appreciate
thank you,
being
Andy.
here. We're so glad to have you all joining in, and thank you for sharing your information through the chat and question and answer. Chat should be open now, so you should be able to use that to communicate. You don't have any voice in this. You can't speak and ask questions out loud, but you can submit Q&A throughout the presentation, and you can send things through chat, and we'll ask you to share some different things as we go on. This is our class on measuring and sharing your impact to attract funders. And it goes in complement, it's sort of a complement to the other trainings that we've been doing with you, in that it helps tell that story to the different funders that you're going to reach out to get support from. And you need to know where to find them. You need to know how to write proposals. You need to know how to organize your fundraising, but you also need to know how to tell the story of what you do and how you make change in the most effective way. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm Dave Holmes. I am the Educational Programming Manager for Candid. I'm in our Cleveland office in Cleveland, Ohio. And I'm joined today by Lori Guidry, who is in our San Francisco office, or well, in that area.
Yes, in the Bay Area. Yeah.
Bay Area. Okay, sounds good. Lori's going to be taking part of this presentation. I'm going to be taking the other, and we'll be watching the chat and the Q&As as we go on. So please do send in your questions, as I said, anytime. And we'll have different times when we pause for translation and pause for discussion. If you've never done anything with Candid before, let me tell you what we are and what we do. Candid started as an organization. It's getting close to 5 years ago now that we combined two other organizations to make Candid. Candid came out of the Foundation Center, which was a collection, an organization that had been around for over 60 years, collecting information on givers and grant makers from all across the world, and teaching people how to write grants and how to get money from different funders. About 5 years ago, we combined with another organization called GuideStar. GuideStar has been collecting information on nonprofits and sharing that information. And together, what we try to do is to share information for funders about nonprofits and for nonprofits about funders. So we like to find out where the money comes from, where it goes, and why it matters, and how we can help you do your jobs better. So we do a lot of training. A lot of our trainings are free. A lot of our trainings are available online in our Candid Learning site. And so I hope you will take a look at some of the other resources that we have. We'll probably mention a few as we go on today. We're really grateful for Border Philanthropy Partnership for making this training possible. And thank you so much to Andy and Melora and Salif for all of the work that you have done to make this as accessible as possible to as many people as possible. So I appreciate that. And we appreciate being here. And yes, this is being recorded. I'm not sure that it's going to come out in the next 48 hours, but it's definitely going to come to you, a recording of this. So you will have an access to it.
Dave, I see a hand raised. I'm going to ask Claudia if she can put something in the chat or the Q&A if it's urgent.
Yeah. So, yeah, if you're having any trouble or technical difficulties, please do let us know through the chat or the questions. Appreciate it. So this training is about thinking about measuring your impact and sharing it in order to tell the best story to potential funders. And we're going to talk about that in terms of an outcome mindset, thinking about your programs based on outcomes thinking. And this is something that you will find has become the dominant way that most funders are understanding organizations. And you may already have good relationships with different funders, and they know what you do and they are willing to support you. But when you're trying to tell the story to a new funder and trying to get the word out about the changes that you make in the community, it's good to be able to do it in a streamlined fashion. So we're going to use what's called a logic model. And if you've never used a logic model before, don't be afraid. It sounds a little intense, but it's really something that is designed to help you organize your programs and be kind of a structure for what you write. And if you write grant proposals, it's essentially the central part of any grant proposal, the main part where you talk about how your program works, who it works for, and what changes it does to the communities that you serve. So we'll go through all of that. And hopefully you will get a good idea. There will be opportunities for you to engage and try and understand this clearly for yourself. And then there will be options for you to do more work on this as a follow-up, as something that you might want to do for your own organization after this class. So do please ask questions, because we don't want to scare anybody with some terminology that maybe you've never seen before. And we don't want to have anybody feel like, oh, no, this is too hard, because it isn't too hard. If you know your program, if you know who you help and you know why they need help and what you do for them, then you can do this. We don't have actually a Zoom poll for this one, but what I am going to ask you is to put into the chat just what your experience level with measurements and outcome and telling your story are. So you can just do real quickly: a lot, a little, none at all, some, not sure, any of those things. You can just drop that in the chat. We have some and a good bit. That's pretty good. Some, looks like some is a dominant feeling here. That's good. Medium, none. Okay, well, somewhere very little, a little, some, poco, mediano, somewhere in there between poco and mediano seems to be, and sin experiencia, that seems to be the vast range here. Well, that's good. You don't have to have a lot of experience. If you do, this is not going to hurt you. It's not going to be something that is going to be boring, because you want to make sure that you do this in the most effective way possible. And we try to teach it in a way that means that you can immediately apply it to what you do and how you write your information. If you're thinking of getting one specific thing out of today's workshop, please do add it. And by the way, there's just a couple of notices that are coming in. If you want to have simultaneous interpretation, you can make those selections in your Zoom panel while you're doing that. But share one thing you might want to get out of today's workshop. What's a question that you've had or a problem that you've had related to sharing your impact, attracting funders, any of that? You can't think of one thing in particular. You can just simply, let's see. Writing better outcome goals. Yeah, outcomes can be very tricky. Other things related to donations, absolutely. Anything else? More attractive to funders, to track new funders. One of the things that this is going to be able to do for you is to have get the language together that will be very useful for approaching all kinds of funders. And we're not going to be teaching proposal writing per se today, and we're not going to be teaching writing a letter of request to a funder. But what you're going to be learning today is going to be material that becomes the essence of those proposals and those letters. So hopefully that will help. Measuring impact is vital, and we will talk about how difficult it can be and also how you can make it a key part of the way that you design your programs too. So hopefully you'll learn all of that as we get in, and thank you all for sharing. All right, so we're going to get started with the basics. What are outcomes? And I think that people will use this word in a way, or use a variety of words that seemingly are the same as an outcome. Sometimes they'll say, changes or outcomes, or there's other words that will crop up. An outcome is simply a change in attitude, beliefs, knowledge, skills, behavior, and or condition that results from the services you provide. So simply, you do your program, you work with one person, that one person is changed by your program in some way or another. They change their beliefs, they change what they know so that they can take a test, so they can pass something, so they can do something. They change their behavior so that it's not as risky, or it's not as negative as it can be, or they change their condition. They become employed, they become healthier. Those are all outcomes, and those are all results from any program that you would do. Not every program has the same results, obviously. Not every program has changes in all these different things, but all of them are striving towards specific outcomes. And the trouble with outcomes, again, as I mentioned, is that you get thrown a lot of terms at you. So there's outputs and outcomes and goals and milestones and benchmarks and achievements and indicators. That is the world of the nonprofits. And some funders like one word, some funders are just talk about results. Some funders will just talk about benchmarks. And you go, well, is that the same? Is that exactly what they're talking about? And in a lot of ways, these are not the same, but related. And there's definitely a difference between having a goal and having an output and having an outcome. So hopefully you'll be able to understand these as we go through. And if you're not sure, if there's one of them that really puzzles you, even after we're done, please make sure that you ask about it, because we want to make sure that we explain them. So I'm going to go into my part of this and ask you guys to share questions. And then we'll pause just before the break and take all those questions and see if there's anything that we can clarify. And then we'll have a little break, and then Lori's going to take over and talk about that. Any questions or anything that anybody needs to put forth before we get started? So what we teach and what we hope that you will learn is a shift in perspective, because it's very easy to talk about something like activities. I did 5 classes. We held 16 classes, and these people came to these classes and then they went home. So you gave me money to do 6 classes, and so I've done them. Whatever, counting the numbers and that kind of thing, that doesn't really tell anybody anything. It tells the person that you did something, but it doesn't tell what that something was. So you could say, well, we held 16 classes. That doesn't necessarily mean that anybody came. It doesn't necessarily mean that there was a change in people that did come. Maybe you just held the classes and nobody paid attention and they went home and they forgot all about it. So focusing on the actual activity is less important than focusing on results. And all of these different types of thinking are a shift from busily doing something and just that's the be all and end all of what you do, to making a difference. So instead of providing a service, we did this thing, we did class, or we did this, could be anything, could be we provided food for somebody, we provided this kind of, you wouldn't want to back something like, well, we gave everybody a shot if you didn't know what that shot was going to do. If you didn't know that you were going to get immune to a particular disease. So think about, instead of the service, think about the change that's been made in the people that you worked with. Think about the people that fund you, not people that just want to hand you money to do stuff, but people that want to invest in you, invest in what you're doing, and then see what their return on investment is. And Claudia, if you were raising your hand, if there's a question, you could put it in chat, and we can make sure that we will get the answers to that. The proposal that you would write for a grant is not so much a proposal about like, here's why you should give me money. I'm going to do these things, therefore you should give me money. It should be a plan that you're talking about how you're going to help the world get better, how you're going to help the people that you help change. That's what it is. It's a plan for making change. And the funder wants to invest in that plan. That's what the perspective is that we want to change here. So I'm going to go into that by talking about a way of looking at for different types of programs. So I talked about this simple thing where you count people. 150 participants attended the program. That sounds good. You definitely want to count, because you definitely want to keep track how many people came and all that kind of information. But imagine that this is a workforce development program. You want to know, of those people that attended, what happened to them? 85 graduated, 100 got employed within the first month of the program. Which of those two things makes you more excited? Obviously, it would be the thing that showed a change that has been made among the people that you help. Here's another way of looking at it. We distributed 5,000 cans of food. That's a lot of food. That seems really impressive. If you see 5,000 cans of food, that looks really impressive. But it doesn't tell me what happened to that food. We gave them a bunch of cans of food and they sat on a shelf for a long time. That's not what anybody wants. 150 hungry people consume nutritional food 3 times per week for 3 months. That tells me a lot more about that food. It tells me that it has made a difference in their lives. People who were hungry were not hungry after this. And over the course of 3 months, they were fed daily and became much healthier. We have a question from Natha that is, I think, going to come up a lot. And so I'm going to make sure that we address it early on here. Is what methods and approaches are effective in assessing the standard return on investment for intangible outcomes? And that's a difficult question to answer because intangible outcomes, as we'll see when we get into the logic model, there you have to be able to say they're in some way tangible because you have to know that they happened. But intangible outcomes, and maybe if you want to include what a possible intangible outcome might be, my job, or what I feel that a nonprofit's job is to make those intangible outcomes, the changes that you see in the people that you help, as tangible as possible and as well explained as you can. And hopefully we'll get into that a little bit more as we go on. But feeding people, getting them jobs, those are tangible. Those are very clear. All of this starts back at the beginning of the program. And that's where we're going to start with this. You have to think about what you want to do with your program. And a lot of you, if you've been doing your program for a while, you've already done this work. But think about starting small when you describe what it is that you're going to do. Describe the kind of change that is expected to happen as a result of the program. What will the participants look like or act like when the program is considered a success? You know, maybe they won't look all that different, but they will be different inside. They'll have more nutrition. They'll have more energy. They'll have more focus. They'll know a language. What is the change that happens? And then when you're describing the change, I'll just also describe the degree to which the participants will change. I like to think of it as something that could happen instantaneously. Like when you're taught how to do CPR, I don't know if any of you have ever taken CPR classes, but during that class, you become an expert in how to do CPR. Maybe you're not the best at it as the teacher or anything like that, but you become somebody who, when you walked into the class, you couldn't save anybody's life. When you walk out, you can. That's a quick change, and that might last your entire life that you learned it. But there are other changes that might be over the course of time. You take a series of classes and you learn how to speak a new language, or you learn how to do a particular skill that will get you a job. That's something that might be a long-term thing that would lead to even better positions for you, lead to the ability to get a job. All of those are things that are part of thinking about outcome target. The other part of that is estimating who is going to be changed, the number of core participants that will change, and the nature of their change. I have been a foundation representative, and I have written a lot of grants. And it's very nice to say, when you are writing grants and when you're trying to tell your story, that anybody could change. If you have an arts program, who's going to benefit from this? Well, anybody could. If they saw it, they could benefit from it. But in reality, does everybody see your art project? Does everybody be a part? Is everybody a part of your class? Who are likely to be the number one people, or the group of people that you are going to serve? Is it a school district? Is it a population from a particular neighborhood? Who are the people that are going to be a part of this, that are going to change? And what is that change going to be? Try to narrow it down rather than saying it could be anybody who wandered by. It's not likely to be that. It's likely to be a specific population, this school district, this classroom, people who have visited this clinic. Those are what you want to narrow down. So you're focusing on what change is, how much the change is going to be, and who is specifically going to be changed. It seems like a simple thing, but there are many programs that I've read about that are so vague about it that if I was an investor, if I was a funder, I would have a hard time taking my money and say, I trust that this is going to happen. So I'm going to give you the money to do it, because I don't know who it is that's happening to. And I don't know roughly, I only know roughly what you're going to do. All right. This is a little exercise for you, and I'm not going to ask you to share them, but if you do want to, you can certainly put them in the text, in the slideshow, or in the chat here. Setting an outcome target can be as simple as filling in the blanks here. Of the blank participants served, at least blank will do something by some time. So an example could be, of the 15 participants served, at least 90% will learn CPR by the end of the class. So figuring that some people are just not going to be paying attention, and some people are going to have to leave early. Some people are just not, really taking it seriously. Of the 15 participants served, at least 90% will learn CPR by the end of the class. That's a simple outcome target. How could you say something like this, filling in those blanks, in a sentence? And you can put this in the chat if you like, and we can ask people to share. I see someone has already put in one really good one there. I should mention that these outcomes, what you're aiming for, should be specifics. Graduating from college, graduating from university, that is definitely something that you can measure. It's a change in condition. Literally, it's a change in degree. Specific and measurable. That's what the first part of SMART is. Specific and measurable. SMART is an acronym that just simply means specific, measurable, attainable, results-oriented, and timely. So 90% will graduate from college. If that's your outcome that you're going for, that tells me of a certain number, 90% are going to change their outcome. They're going to graduate by the end of the program. And that's kind of realistic, because if you ever say, like, 100% of the people that are going through my program are going to benefit from it, that's really rare. Is that attainable? Is that something? It's very specific, and it might be measurable. You could tell whether they did it or not, but is it attainable? Is it something that you can do all the time? Is it?
David,
Yes, we have questions coming in. I see.
can you repeat the
acronym?
the
Yeah.
SMART outcomes definition?
Specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and timely. I'm sorry, and results oriented and timely. Specific, measurable. I'm not going to spell measurable right. Attainable, results oriented, timely. So, meaning the last part of that being results oriented, meaning focusing on the change, focusing on what comes out, not just on like, well, they were there and I counted them. And focusing on timely, in that it happens within a specific period of time. Most funders, when they're looking to support you and invest in your program, they want to know that what's going to change in what you're doing is going to happen within a time period, within a measurable time period. They don't want to say, well, eventually you're going to get this. Nobody wants to fund eventually. Everybody wants to fund within a certain amount of time. 120 students starting school. I'm sorry, my Spanish is not terrific, so I'm gonna ask somebody to translate that. I've seen a lot of good outcome targets in the chat here. Any other questions that are coming in, Laura or Salif? Do you want to share any of them?
No, not yet. Go ahead, please.
Okay, this is good. Well, think about this and think about what you would do to put this in for your targets, because this is the basis of creating a logic model, which Lori is going to tell you about in just a little bit. Define success in terms of results. This is what we're underlining here. When you know that you have achieved the thing that you're aiming for, you need the evidence to back it up. And one of the things that was a concern for one of the people that are sharing questions is that it's difficult sometimes to have that evidence. How do you prove that something has changed? How do you prove that you made a difference in someone's life? Sometimes it's very easy. You can test them. You can say, well, I know they learned CPR. I know they learned this language because I tested them. They didn't know it before, and now they know it. The only thing that happened in the middle there, or the main thing, was our class. So that's how they learned it. That's an easy way to test. But how do you know that people's lives are better? How do you know that you have increased their ability to cope? Do you have some other kind of tool that measures that? There are specific measurement tools that are used for schools and for learning different behaviors. There's measurement of all sorts of, emotional states, surveys that you can give people. Sometimes it's something that is just, it's so simple that you're like, well, how do I know? There's a example I like to use of a program that serves 3 and 4 year olds. Actually, I think it was 3 to 5 year olds. And they were getting recreation with musical instruments. They were learning how to play. They were trying them out. And this was for a Boys and Girls Club. And the question was, how do we know that this is a program they really like? How do you survey and test people that can't even maybe read yet? But what you can do is ask them. What they did in this case was ask them to circle how they felt after they did this program. They had a smiley face, they had a nothing face, and they had a frowny face. And 90% of the kids circled the happy face. They really enjoyed it. And that's how they proved that this had an impact. I wish everything was that simple in terms of understanding how changes are made. And as we get into this, you're going to see that short-term impacts, short-term outcomes are a little bit easier to measure, because you can usually see by the time they leave your presence that they've had a change done. But the further away they get from you, and we're talking like down the line through the years, it's harder to prove that you had that specific impact. But we'll definitely talk about that as we get into outcomes. Throughout the program, you have enough resources remaining to get results. Part also of managing to get to a certain place is to not starve your program. I don't know how many nonprofits I have worked with that have said, I have this great idea. I'm going to try and do it on, with as least amount of money as possible, because it's difficult to fundraise. It's difficult sometimes to get the money that you need. But the thing is, if you don't get enough money to run this program, to run it successfully, to have all the materials that you need, if you're running an after-school program or a program that's for people that are coming from their job to then take a class, if you don't offer refreshments, it seems like a little thing, but it's not a little thing to the person that's starving and hungry and wants to come to your class, but needs to go to dinner because they haven't eaten all day. Those are little things that you have to make sure you have the resources to provide. Do you have enough teachers? I have read lots of grant proposals where people are saying, I'm going to do this and I'm going to double the number of people I serve, but I'm not going to change the number of people who are going to deliver that. That becomes a big problem. Throughout the program, you have to see that the inputs, the things that you put into your program, are going to be enough to get you to the outcomes. And that's what a logic model helps you do too. So the benefits from all of this, you know what success looks like because you can show it. You can show it. You can show specific things that you've accomplished that are not just vague. And it helps you to learn. It helps you to see very clearly. You thought that if you had this many people doing these activities, at the end, 75% or 90% would achieve the success that they needed. If that doesn't happen, you're able to think about changing it around and making it work because you've seen what you intended to do and you've seen that it did not work. So you can go back and look at it more closely and say, well, where did it fall down? Kind of like if you were running a lab experiment, what things can you change to improve that? It also puts meaning to mission. Everybody here, I hope, as an organization, has a fantastic mission about serving people. But if you can't prove to somebody that you do the thing that you say that you are set up to do, they're not going to invest in you. So, oops, I'm going backwards here. Remember all that? Some of the other things that benefit in your organizations from this are that everybody in your organization will know more about how your program works. I don't know if you've ever had this situation where you've asked a board member or you've asked a staff member that's new to explain the program to somebody and you've been looking over their shoulder or listening and you're going, no, that's not right. That's not right. You want to make sure that the staff understands what you're striving to accomplish and the board understands as much as the people that you're talking to understand. It helps the staff get focused and build energy if they know this is what we're striving to make happen. I've worked for organizations where it's not really clear, where are we going with this? Why are we doing this? Who's going to benefit from that? I have been in that situation, but it is used not just for fundraising, but for keeping your programs together, for designing new programs and evaluating the success of old programs. So the terms we're going to focus on for the rest of this class, and in just a little bit, I'm going to pause and ask for questions. The terms we're going to focus on, we're going to try and narrow down to just 4. And you will see that the 4 of them have synonyms that you probably have heard. And I'll try and mention a few of these as I go through here. But the first part of any program, any logic model, any description of a program that you're going to do is the inputs. What do you need to make it happen? And that includes not just the money that you might need or the people that you might need, but the stuff that you need and the space that you need. What all is vital for this program? Do you need to collaborate with another group? You're doing a program that helps seniors and works with a school district. Those collaborators are essential to the program. So think about all the inputs. What do you need even before you start doing anything? What do you need? The second thing you do is to take those inputs and think about what you're going to do with them. What are the activities that the program is going to involve? Those are the things that you set out, you plan to do. Now, sometimes there's a little bit of a confusion between that and the next term, which Lori and I will try and make sure that you never get confused about by the end of this class. We can measure that. And one person says, I get confused between outcomes and outputs. Outcome is impact and output the results before we generate impact. That's a question. Well, let me try and make it as clear as possible. Activities are the things that you plan to do. All of the things in a program that you say, we're going to do these 5 things. We're going to run this class. We're going to host this meeting. We're going to recruit these participants. These are things you're planning to do. Outputs are actually the count of those, or the way that you can talk about what was done. So if I say as an activity, I'm going to hold a swim meet. I'm just making this as simple as possible. I'm going to hold a swim meet. If you hold the swim meet, then you can say we had one swim meet and 250 kids showed up for it. That's an output. It's counting what happened. It's saying this is, in terms of what we did, this is the number of times we did it. But an outcome is, and another word for outcome is results or impact. It's what changed because you did that swim meet in this case. So you planned a swim meet, that's an activity. You did a swim meet, count with 250 kids, that's an output. And an outcome is those 250 kids had a fantastic time. They won their races. They learned sportsmanship. They learned healthy activity. These are all outcomes of having a swim meet. Now, most programs are much more complicated than a swim meet, and that's why it gets confusing. So we're going to try and make sure you get all of these things. The whole idea of an outcomes framework is if, then. And that's what a logic model characterizes. If you have these inputs and you do these specific services, you plan them as things you're going to do, and then you do them. Those services or activities and outputs are going to benefit participants with these outcomes, these changes. It's almost meant to be a flow from what you put in and what comes out at the end. And we'll underline that in just a little bit. But first, I want to take a little bit of break, step back a little bit, and answer some questions. And I'll ask for translations, or if somebody can say what's come up, what questions have come up that are the most significant. Anybody? And we have a number of people with raised hands. You'll have to put them in the chat, though, those questions in the chat.
Yeah, David, they're asking about the differences between outcomes and results. There's a question for you in the direct chat to you.
Okay.
And also people are asking if we're sharing the presentation. We already shared a link where they can find the materials, the handouts, and the presentations in both English and Spanish.
Okay. So that is being shared, and we are trying to get clarity between outcomes and outputs. Summarizing again, I mean, and it will happen. We will make sure that you understand this by the end of this class. Simply, an output is a countable thing. Normally, it doesn't tell you anything about the people that are involved. It's just simply that they were there. You know, you're all sitting in class. There are 201 people attached to this class right now. So I can say with confidence that 201 people attended this class. It doesn't tell me anything about what you're learning. It doesn't tell me whether you're happy or sad. It doesn't tell me anything about who you are. But if I look at that 201 people that are participating, and I say, of those 201 participants, we know that 180 of them received information and clear understanding of the difference between outputs and outcomes. Then that's an outcome, that's a change. So outputs are just countable things, less important. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here so I can look closer at some of the questions that are coming in. So we have a question about an annual report. When you do an annual report, it's the tool to reporting, but when we request things, we only put results of the changes. I'm not sure I fully understand that question, but I think the idea is when you are trying to talk about the end point of what you're doing, you should be able to talk about what happened in the past. And that's what an annual report is. But this kind of planning that leads to activities and outputs and outcomes, that is something you do ahead of time before the program is done so that you're ready later on to report on what you did. See if there's any other questions that have not been covered before we take a little break. Anything else that's coming in that we want to talk about? Want to just think about what we've done, and then we'll come back and have Lori talk about it. So we have one person who's talking about the medical consultations that your organization offers. Those are the products, those are the outputs. You offer medical consultations if that's your program and that's how it works. The consultations are something that you offer, and maybe you offer 16 of them, or you've offered 200 to 500 different people, whatever it is. But that doesn't tell me what those medical consultations have done for those people. So we don't know the outcomes of that. We just know that as an output. This will become very clear over the course of time here. Any other questions? I am going to go to the break and turn this over after, what are we taking, Lori, about 10 minutes? 15?
Yeah, I think 10 is fine. Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take 10 minutes.
Mhm.
So it is 48 minutes after the hour. So let's start again right at the hour. How's that? Give everybody 12 minutes. All right. So we'll see you back here in about 12 minutes.
Going to expand on them. We're going to expand on them in this section. So we are recording. Welcome back. And I just want to start with what the definition of the logic model is. As Dave noted, it's based on if-then. It's used to illustrate how the program affects its clients and it's a logical procession. That's why it's called a logic model. So really, you're going from the inputs to the activities to the outputs to the outcomes in sort of a linear fashion. Another way to think about the logic model, I always like to think of it as a roadmap, because what's the saying? If you don't know where you're going, how do you know if you're there yet? So the logic model sort of maps out what you're trying to accomplish, what you're trying to get to. So again, it's a linear progression from one thing to the other. Now, when you translate this, there's a lot of good reasons to do a logic model. As we mentioned, just for setting the organizational priorities and things, but also it comes into play with grant proposals, because this is how you're going to tell your story. We do these things, and this is what we're going to do with them. This is what's going to be produced, and then this is the outcome. So that's another use of the logic model, not only for your organization, but also for your grant proposal. I'm going to sort of look at the chat, but not. So Dave, you all will have to let me know what's in chat. Again, we're going to talk about the terms that we use again, and we'll kind of go over them. Inputs, activities, outputs, and then outcomes are the main things to know. We're going to talk about each of these in turn. But before we jump into that, we're going to talk about the need statement. So before you can draft your logic model, you want to state the problem that you're trying to solve. In other words, your overall destination of where you're going. So the need statement answers that question. Basically, why do I exist? Why is my organization, why are we doing the things that we're doing? What's the problem you're trying to address? Is it compelling? Remember, you're going to people for funding. You want them to invest in this project. So you have to tell them, why is this urgent? Why is this a compelling issue? What is the scale of the problem? Again, how many people does it affect? Where do they live? Those are all questions of scale. And then who is affected? Again, who are the people who are going to be affected by the problem, or who's going to be affected if this problem doesn't get solved? Those are the types of things that go into your need statement. And it's not enough to just state the problem or need. You also want to back it up with supporting facts and statistics. Now, the need statement, it's not about the need of your organization. It's not about, well, we need a van or we need a new building. It's about the need that you are addressing by your programs. What is the issue that you're trying to solve? So now I'm gonna have an example here from one of our previous classes, and I'll just give everyone, sorry, we don't have the translation, because this was a last minute addition in the slides, but this was an example of a need statement for someone in our class that was working on providing technology to seniors in this area. So mentions computers have fundamentally changed people's lives. This is a good example of what the need statement does. Number one, what is the problem being addressed? It's that seniors don't have the access to technology. Why is this a compelling issue? Well, because the senior agencies, Social Security, Medicare, Health and Human Services, all of these agencies are providing their services via the web. So this is why it's a compelling issue that not all seniors have web access.
Lori,
Yes.
can you read the statement because we don't have it in the slides in
In the
Spanish,
slides,
so the
okay.
translator can translate into Spanish,
Okay,
please.
I will read it from the start then. Computers have fundamentally changed people's lives for baby boomers, especially baby boomers in Clark County, Nevada. However, a digital divide exists as many entities, the Social Security Administration, Medicare, and Nevada Health and Human Services move towards web-based access for services. The Elders County, Nevada 2023 survey notes that Clark County has 330,646 senior citizens aged 65 plus as of 2021. A Pew Research study in 2021 revealed that 92% of the 65 plus population has a cell phone, but only 61% have a smartphone. Our organization is working to bridge the technology gap with the 65 plus population. And again, this is a good example because it's clear the problem that's being addressed. It's clear why it's compelling. It's compelling because if seniors don't have web access, they can't find out the information they need from the Social Security Administration or Medicare. Who is affected? It tells you the population of Clark County, Nevada. The 330,000 seniors, that's who's affected. And then what is the scale of the problem? Well, an estimated 61% of these people don't have cell phones. So this is a good example of a need statement that states what people are trying to solve. So this is the basis for your logic model. Again, it lays out exactly what you're working on. And then the logic model tells how you're going to get there. Another analogy we like to use for the logic model is that it's a recipe, okay? Your inputs are the ingredients. Say your end result is to make a chocolate cake. So the inputs are your ingredients, the chocolate, flour, an oven, bowls for mixing the cake. These are all would be inputs. The activity is that you're going to prepare the cake. You're going to beat the eggs, you're going to melt the chocolate, you're going to preheat the oven, you're going to put it in. These are the activities. The outputs, of course, is the cake itself. The cake, how big is the cake? It's a cake that serves 8 people, enough to serve 8 people, a 2-inch slice of cake. Now, what is the outcome of baking this recipe? And the outcome is the reason why you're cooking, okay? And in this scenario, it can vary. Maybe the need is just to address someone that's hungry, or maybe it's to celebrate a party or a birthday or something. Or maybe it's to just bring people together. Maybe you're doing a potluck. Those are the types of outcomes. In other words, that's the why you're making this cake. And that's really what you want to think in terms of your programs. Why are you doing it? What do you want to happen as a result of putting on this program? What do you want to happen as a result of baking this cake? Okay, so finally, let's see how this all comes together in a logic model. So first of all, the inputs. Okay, these are things that you need in order to run the activities. Another way to think about it is these are the things that the money you would get from a donor are going to pay for. So a lot of things, these are physical things. Staff you have to pay for, a facility, whether you're renting or owning it, equipment and supplies. So a lot of these things are things you would purchase with the money, but some of them are non-cash things. For example, maybe you need volunteers or you need partners. You're working with other organizations in your community, or a curriculum that you're going to use. So some of these are monetary and they're concrete, some of them are less so, but these are everything that you need to put on the program. And Dave had mentioned about how this helps determine what you're doing. Say you are providing meals for the homeless. Well, if you just want to provide the meals, if that's your objective, which is to provide as many as possible, then you could possibly hand them out from the back of a truck, or you could go around delivering them. But let's say your goal is not just to provide the meals, but also to provide a community for people who don't have housing, to bring them together. So then your inputs are going to be a little different. Then maybe you need to rent space. You need to have volunteers that can come to not only serve the food, but to circulate and socialize with people. So in one case, you're just providing food, which is a worthwhile endeavor. In another case, you're trying to provide community. So the thing is, you need to decide what you're doing so that you understand what you need in order to do it. So that's inputs. Activities is basically what you're doing to address it. What are you actually doing, like on a day-to-day basis? Maybe you're delivering workshops, or you're making visits to patients or tutoring sessions. So this is actually what you do on a day-to-day basis. Very easy to explain, inputs and activities for the most part. People don't have trouble with that. Of course, the difficulty comes when we start talking about outputs and outcomes. So outputs are the things that are produced as a result of these activities. These are usually numerical. That's one way to identify outputs, but not always. But so the activity is that you're delivering workshops. So the outputs would be the number of workshops delivered and perhaps the number of people who attended them. If your activity is to make visits to patients, then the output would be how many visits did you make to how many patients. Same thing with tutoring sessions. How many people attended the tutoring sessions? How often were they offered? Were they once a week? Were they twice a week? These are kind of the outputs. Again, a lot of times they're going to be reflected numerically. And then finally, the outcomes, which really gets into the nitty-gritty of the why do I exist, the need and the need statement. So these are results. We break outcomes down into short-term, medium-term, and long-term outcomes. And if you'll notice in this column, we refer to all of these as changes, and they are changes. What has changed as a result of the people who have encountered your program and your services? So now we have short-term changes, which, as Dave mentioned, these are the easiest to measure. They happen immediately, pretty much. They happen as soon as they encounter your program or shortly afterward, these short-term changes. So let's say, for an example, if it's a jobs training program, then a short-term change is that the people learn a new job skill, whether it's computer training or car repair. So in the short term, they're building their knowledge and their skills. It's very easy to, give them a test or to observe and know if people actually did learn something. You talk to them. These are easier to measure. Now, when it comes to medium-term changes, say for this job training program, we're looking at changes in attitude and behavior. After going through this program, were they confident enough to go find a job using these skills that they learned? And were they successful in looking for work? And did they just feel better about themselves to be able to say, yes, I'm skilled and able to do these things? So that's a medium-term change. There is a way you can track the people who are in your program. There are lots of things on program evaluation. That's something you need to do. It's something, as I said, that's a little harder to do. It's something that takes resources to do, and everybody's not able to get to that point. But ideally, you would be able to track participants from your program and find out how their behavior changed. If you can do that, that's great to illustrate. Dave, you.
There was a question, that had come
Mhm.
in, and it was based on that other example that you used about a percentage of change. So why, for example, should you say like 60% will have this change? Why would you choose a number like 60%?
You choose a number because realistically, I don't think any of us can say that everyone who's encountered our programs or services is going to be affected in the same way, or is going to be affected at all. There might be people who come to our trainings who get done and say, oh, I still don't understand that, So that's why you want to set this is about being realistic. They talked about SMART objectives. This is about being realistic. Realistically, how many people or what percentage of people would possibly benefit from encountering your programs or
And
services?
oftentimes when I see it, at least with programs that I've worked in, you don't all automatically know it's going to be like 80% of the people are going to succeed and 20% are not. You have things that you use to measure, and you use one as, there's that word again, benchmark, as kind of an idea of, well, this is what we've seen in the past. From what we've asked in a question, about 70% of the people that took the class felt confident in doing what we were teaching them. And our goal is to make it more than 70%, to make it like 72% or something. You can build from an earlier percentage. But when you first start, you don't always know that number until you do a survey. And you may have great optimism. I would never say 100%.
I was about to say, you want to estimate on the lower side.
Low, I mean, at least on
Especially if you
on
haven't
what,
done it before.
yeah, I would say I would love it when we do a class and there are 100 people that are signed up. I would love it if we had 100% attendance, but I know that I never was 100% attendance in school, and things just happen. So,
Any other questions
Not right now.
or- okay, all right. So short term, you said medium term changes in attitude and behavior. As I said, this is something you might see within, we put rough time frames on this, but it's really hard. Short term changes, maybe up to, a couple of years or so. Medium term changes, maybe 2 to 4 years or something. What actually, happened to them after they encountered your services. Again, hard, not always easy to measure. You don't always know it, but if you have an opportunity, if you're seeing the same people over and over again, if you can even get anecdotal information that they said, yeah, I took that class, 2 years ago, and now I got a new job. That's the kind of thing you want to keep track of. That's a good thing to share with potential donors and funders. And then the long-term change, and this is what we call impact. This is a change in condition. So yeah, not only did I go out, feel confident enough to go out and apply for that job, but now 2 years on, I've been working, I've been able to move my family into a bigger house. It benefits you, it benefits my whole community now. I'm doing so much better. That's impact. That's a long-term outcome. And ideally, all of us would want to track and be able to see this. But just because you can't necessarily see this, outcomes are sort of, they're inspirational. A lot of times, you may never know. We don't always know when we're teaching these classes, how many of you went out and got a grant. And maybe this changed the whole course of what you were doing. You applied everything. That's wonderful. But unless you let us know, or unless we ask you in 4 or 5 years, which we don't always do, we don't know that. But it's still good to have these outcomes, to have them in mind when you're doing the logic model, because this is inspirational. This is what you aspire to have happen from your programs. So that's why it can be, it's specific, but again, you're not always going to be able to measure this. All right. I'm also going to go back to this slide. We mentioned about, having that shift in perspective about, what happens with your program. So let's analyze this a little bit more. So let's say in that first scenario that we said we distributed 500 cans. So when we're trying to think about outcomes, 50% of hungry people in my, neighborhood or that we encountered consume nutritional food. So what's the activity? The activity is that you distributed the cans of food. The output, you distributed 5,000 cans and you reached, 500 people, say. And then the outcome is that those hungry people consume nutritional food 3 times a week for 3 months. So this is what we do. Now, if we wanted to go back and think about inputs, the inputs here would be the cans of food. They would be who was distributing them. Did you have volunteers that drove it around, or did you rent a facility and have people come pick it up? That's going to be an input, the facility, the drivers, the cans of food. So that's how you would put that scenario into a logic model. Let's look at this one about the 150 participants in the program. Okay, the activity is that you delivered a program. Let's say this is a class or a job training program. The output is that you reached 150 participants. We could also add the output, the number of classes you conducted, say. And then the outcome is that so many participants graduated and got employed within their first month out of the program. So that's an outcome, and that's more or less a short-term outcome because we put a time frame around that this is within 1 month of going through the program, they got employed. This is our goal. Again, and this is why you specify a percentage, because again, not all 150 participants necessarily got employed, but if we go back here, 100 got employed, 85 graduated. So that's how you put that scenario into your logic model. So any other questions? Because we're going to actually do a little exercise for this. So I want to make sure that everybody's clear on what's an input, an activity, an output, and an outcome.
I think we're okay for right now. I'm looking and I don't see any new questions that have come in, but if you do have them, please do put them in the chat or the Q&A.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay, so we're going to go through a little exercise. I have some polls set up here, and I'm going to ask. Okay, so if I say I'm going to, I'm sorry, let me back up. Let me close this out. I have to give you the background. Okay, this exercise relates to this following program, and this is a need statement. This is a program that works with children of incarcerated parents. So this is the statement of the need. Children of incarcerated parents are more likely to enter the criminal justice system and lag behind their peers in academic and social development. New York City has some of the most disadvantaged neighborhoods with high rates of incarceration. So this is your need statement. We've mentioned the scope of the project. It's in New York City. And it's compelling because New York City has so many neighborhoods with high rates of incarceration. And then the fact is, again, that, the issue is that children of incarcerated parents are more likely to end up in jail themselves. So this program we're going to discuss tries to mentor children of incarcerated parents by providing sort of a stand-in for their parent or a mentor while their parent is away, and to help guide them through the troubles they might have growing up and things. So this is the program that we're going to try to answer these questions about. So now back to the polls. Okay, I see some of you have already started. Your answers are still there, even though I pulled the plug on it. So we're going to recruit and match 100 caring adults with 100 children of incarcerated parents each year. So there's that time frame. This is within a year. We're going to match 100 adults with 100 children. So now is this an input, an activity, an output, or an outcome?
Looks like we have about 40. Don't be afraid. You're not, there's no names that are going to
There's
be
no
attached to
names.
it,
It's
so
perfectly anonymous.
take a guess, make it
Mhm,
feel, choose your best guess. You won't be punished for it.
mhm. I'm gonna try to get up to 75% participation. Again, don't don't overestimate. I know not everyone is gonna answer the poll, so we'll try to see if we can get 75%. Just give it another minute or two. I don't think we're gonna reach 75, so I'm gonna go on and
A
end
couple
the
people
poll.
seem to have accidentally closed the window, so
Oh,
we'll get there.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, I think maybe we'll start with this, and then when you get the next poll, you can
Okay,
yeah.
okay, all right. Okay, so 60% said activity, and you are correct. That is right. This is an activity that you are going to be doing, recruiting and matching the adults and the kids. Now, if you said it was an output, I'll kind of give you credit for that, because in a way it is an output as well, because the end result is that you're going to have 100 adults paired with 100 children. So it could I could see how that could be a reasonable second thing. And the same thing with an input, although it's not an input because of the way it's worded. We're going to recruit and match. So that's an activity. It's not an input. An input would be, we're looking for 100 volunteers. Okay, that would be an input because you need those volunteers to run the program. But because it's phrased as a recruit and match, it's an activity. Okay. All right, I will go back to the next one and I won't pull the plug this time. Okay, the number of mentees and mentors who participate in the program. Is that an input, an activity, an output, or an outcome? The number of mentees and mentors who participate in the program.
It's neck and neck here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. We'll get to 50%. I'll stop it. Okay. All right. So we're almost evenly split between input and output, which I understand, but the correct answer is an output. The number of mentees and mentors who participate. It's not an input because you're not going to, have those initially. It's not something you're going to pay for. It's not a resource that you need in order to put on the program. So that's why it's an output and not an input.
A little tricky though. Could be if it were number of class, or it would be, if it were number of personnel or something like that. If it were number of grants that you received for it, that would
right. That might be it. Yeah, but mentors, again, the volunteers would be something you would certainly put under your inputs, because you are going to have volunteers, but the mentees, the people who you're going to be serving, are not part of the resources. So, yeah. So that's why it's more of an output than an input. But again, I understand why someone would guess the input. Yeah. All right. All right. So mentees, in other words, the children of incarcerated parents, do not enter the juvenile justice system. This is going to be an easy one.
I think they're getting it on this.
Mhm. That's what I said. I think this is kind of an easier one. All right. So 90% of you said outcome, and that is correct. This is an outcome. This is what you want to happen after they've encountered your program, is that they themselves don't end up in the juvenile justice system. Now, I've got another one related to this, kind of a bonus here. Let me launch this one. So is this a short-term outcome, a mid-term outcome, or a long-term outcome?
Ooh, you threw them a curveball, didn't you?
Yeah, yeah. It's definitely an outcome, but would you say it's short-term, mid-term, or long-term?
Liber says it's not easy. It's just that we are very good students and you are a good teacher.
Oh, thanks. Okay, almost up to 50. Okay, this was a tricky one. I will actually give points for both midterm and long term. I think this could be one or the others. The reason it's not short term is because this is not something that will happen immediately after the program. You know, it's nothing you measure immediately. It's not like we go to the class and then eventually, they're not in the juvenile justice system, but it's not necessarily as a function of the class if they're not there. But midterm, again, 3 to 5 years, long term, 5 years or longer. This is the ultimate goal, is that they don't enter the juvenile justice system. Again, if you can find a way to track this would be great. But if you're talking about children, you may have to track them through their teen years before you could really say that, they didn't enter the juvenile justice system. So I would classify this as midterm or long term. Dave, do you agree with that? You're muted.
I hit too many buttons there.
Okay.
I would say that this one is, if you think about it in terms of like say you start working with these kids and they're 13 and then they don't enter the juvenile justice system by 18. That's a long term just by itself.
Yeah.
But you could make an even longer term outcome. It's just I'm going to lean midterm to long term because it's a definite change over a long period of time.
Okay. I agree. All right. I think I have just 2 more. Okay, provide group activities for the mentors and the mentees to participate in together.
it's very funny because I can see people thinking while they're doing this, how my brain works. Like, that's oh, is it? Wait a minute.
All right. Share the results. So 70% say activity, yes. This is an activity. This is part of, if you're this organization, this is your part of your day-to-day work, is that you are providing group activities for the mentors and the mentees to participate in together. So this is definitely an activity. Okay, so I think that's all the questions I had. Yeah, just wanted to, oh, no, one more. Okay. Okay, mentees learn about the importance of positive school and work behaviors. And again, there's going to be a bonus question for this. I shouldn't have said that. I gave it away.
You're making it too easy for me.
Oh, yeah, this went fast. You all are really getting this now. Okay. An outcome. Yes, this is an outcome. For sure. It's not an output because it's not about just the numbers of what's happening. It's more substantive. So it's an outcome rather than an output. It's not just about how the number of mentees or mentors. It's that mentees learn about the importance of positive school and work behaviors. So now the bonus, is this a short, mid, or long-term outcome? I had to think about this. Good. All right. Okay, majority says it's a short-term outcome. A few say midterm. I'm gonna say go with short-term. I could see how you might think it's a midterm, but the reason it's a short-term is because in the course of the program and these activities and things, they're going to be learning about something. Remember we talked about short-term being accumulating skills or knowledge. In other words, you'll be able to see right away if they're learning about positive school and work behaviors. Now, granted, if you, test them or follow up with them a few years later, you might even see more impact of that. But the thing is, by them being with the mentees, they are teaching them about positive school and work behaviors. So this would be a short-term outcome. And Dave, if you can shed any more light on that.
Yeah, I'm just
Go
looking
ahead.
at some of the
Yeah.
comments too.
Mhm.
Andres is saying, I think it should be long-term because learning something and applying it can be helpful across your professional life. I think that's
Mhm.
true. The learning
That's
happens
true. Mhm.
early, and then the application and the change of behavior,
Mhm.
that's something that happens across life. So you could state this instead of mentees learn about the importance of positive school and work behaviors. Mentees embrace positive school and work behaviors might be a longer term outcome.
Yeah. Or
Kind of the way that you say it.
mentees show improvement in school and work
Exactly.
behaviors. That's something that comes after the program. Yeah. But
And,
yeah,
and Nathan
I could see both. Yeah.
Yeah, Nathan has a question, or it says, what would you consider a long term? And do you consider 20 to 30 years a long term? I'm like, well, yeah, of course.
Absolutely. Yeah.
The thing I think of short term as almost immediate, almost.
Right.
You could test them that day. You could test them as they walk out of class. That's a short term outcome.
Yeah.
And a midterm outcome to me is more, this is going to take a little bit of time for it to show change. Maybe, you could say a school year, you could say less than that. You could say in the next couple of months or by the end of the class. But there are lots and lots of other types of outcomes that become long term. And I mean, I'll give you one of my favorite examples, which is teaching art in schools leads to better outcomes for individuals later in life, because the one of the arguments about the necessity of having art in schools is that it helps with brain development. But how do you say, well, the brain development happens right away? Maybe that makes that person better later on in life. And there have been studies by arts organizations and groups like Advocacy for the Arts about the impact of early school learning on art learning on the overall development and success in life. As you get farther and farther away from the thing that you did, a lot of the times you're reliant on other studies that have done longitudinal studies, or very, something that would be incredibly impossible for you as a nonprofit to do by yourself, but has been proven. I mean, literacy, it's been proven that literacy is important, and that if you learn to read by the 3rd grade, success in life is going to be improved. But you can't do that study. That study's already been done. I hope that.
And the other thing too is that when you're citing these, say if in a grant proposal, you don't have to say short, medium, and long. It's just a way that we're trying to get you to think about outcomes and to think about, how you would measure, particularly those short-term outcomes. If you think about, okay, what do we want them to happen immediately after encountering our program or our service? So those are the things you want to think about how to measure. And then mid and long-term outcomes, again, they're aspirational. What would you want the world to look like after, people have encountered your services or programs? So it's, that's the point of the exercise. As I said, you don't have to say this is short-term and we're going to, accomplish this in 1 or 2 years. You don't have to spell that out. But it's just a way of thinking about the outcomes and what you can measure, what you can't measure, and what you ultimately aspire to.
And we had a couple more comments here. One of them is about sharing the logic model about I think it says labor program, but we will send as follow-up, if you haven't already gotten the handouts. There are a number of handouts that are in this class that we will make available to you. And there are also sample logic models available through our website and through other sites. It's good to look at a lot of different ones because it helps you understand how organizations that are similar to yours might have done a logic model to prove the success of a program. And sometimes it'll show you how others that are working in the same field can really identify success clearly. And yes, Melora is saying the handouts are already available, but she will share the link again.
Yeah, we'll share the links. Okay. All right. Well, I think you've got it. Just
one more question
here.
More question.
Sure.
As an organization, can you define on your own what are the short, medium, and long-term results for evaluation? And I think the answer to that is
yes.
Yes.
And that leads to our next section. And I'm going to turn it back over to Dave about monitoring and evaluation. Yes, absolutely. You should be the ones to determine, what you consider a positive outcome. Yeah.
And I'm going to ask you to stop sharing, Laura.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll share my screen. And I'll go past what we just talked about, but these are available for you to review. Don't blink. Monitoring and evaluation is, we could spend.
Dave, you're showing the Spanish language slides.
Oh,
Did you
I am?
yeah, or
Let me stop sharing and reshare again.
Yes. Mhm.
Share screen. Okay, I'm sharing the English now. You may have it switched so that you're seeing the Spanish language.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, you can switch it back and forth if you want. Anyway, I will, unless somebody else can tell me that this is wrong, I'll just go through. I do want to talk
Yeah,
about.
I'm seeing Spanish language, but maybe not everyone. So, okay.
You should be able to switch that from one to the other. I'm not
Okay.
saying. This is the monitoring and evaluation discussion. And the main thing that I want to point out to you is that you have to think about when you are doing these programs, how do you measure it? How do you get to the point where you can say, this is likely to be the way that I'm going to be able to convince somebody that our program made a difference? And I talked a little bit about it in answering that one question, is that it isn't sometimes you yourself that are doing the long-term understanding of how changes are made. People know that learning literacy makes a difference in people's lives. People know that learning art makes a difference in the way people develop. But normally it's not a small nonprofit that has done that study. They're using and citing studies that have proven the impact of these type of programs. Always good to find out who else has done your programs and how they've proven their success. But for some of the other stuff, particularly the short-term and medium-term outcomes, a funder, when looking to see if they can trust that your program is worthy of investment, are going to expect that you do the kind of monitoring that needs to be done and the kind of evaluation that needs to be done. Evaluation is checking on those outcomes to make sure that they happened. You know, it's testing to see if somebody did learn a particular skill, or testing, surveying, maybe down after the end of a long class, or maybe the next year, to see if there's been changes in behavior. Maybe it's thinking about how you might look at the changes in, like, for example, dropout rates, or the number of people that show up for medical treatment for something that you've been working to slow down. There has to be a way that you can measure, based on how your program is set up, what you're achieving. The other thing, though, that is very important is monitoring as the program goes on. I mean, a lot of people, when they are thinking about evaluation, don't always think about it as monitoring too. Monitoring simply means, if you're going to do a program that has 10 classes, for example, monitoring is that monitoring of outputs. Did these 10 classes happen? Was there a problem that kept a class from happening? You had 10 classes, but nobody showed up. Monitoring would be after that first class that nobody showed up, finding out why that nobody showed up, and making changes. So the two types of evaluation, two types of measurement that happen with any program are measuring to make sure things happen the way that they're supposed to as the program goes on. I worked with Boys and Girls Club, I mentioned earlier, and I will tell you that Boys and Girls Club often had issues with transportation, getting one set of kids to the club and back from the club and that sort of thing. And they didn't assume every time they did a program that the transportation issues were going to be solved by the next program. They monitored to make sure, did that bus come there? Did that bus take the kids and bring them back? Do we need to get one of the buses maintained? Do we have enough drivers? That's monitoring. That's checking to make sure the program works. And that's something you should talk about and think about when you're doing any kind of logic model, is how am I going to monitor to make sure that these activities get done and turn into the outputs that I want, that lead to the outcomes that I'm going for. The outcomes measurement, that is something that is, we can't really say for everyone that's on this particular class. And this is another way of looking at it. Process evaluation is looking at how the program worked. Satisfaction is measuring success and measuring satisfaction of the people that participated. And measuring outcomes is measuring the process. All of these things are part of understanding how to keep track of the success of your program. And as I was starting to say, it's impossible for us to say for all 200 people that are on this call, here's how you measure for your program and here's how you measure for another program. I will say that on Candid Learning, which is on candid.org, if you go into the Candid Learning section, we have lots of information on evaluation. We have classes, short classes on different types of evaluation. We also have what we call knowledge-based articles of information about how do I use different tools to measure my success. We also have information on outcome measurement that's put together in a paper called Measuring What Matters. It was done in partnership with the Global Fund of Community Foundations and Philanthropy for Social Justice. It's about understanding not just that evaluating is tricky, but understanding that evaluating means understanding how changes are made in a community and in society because of specific programs. So if this is something that you are interested in, something that you want to pursue, something maybe you don't have enough for the answers for, you might want to get into looking at this information. Not everybody, I would say that there are some, but not everybody is a statistical whiz. Not everybody went to college and got a degree in measuring success, but everybody can measure the success of their programs if they concentrate on whether or not those changes really happen and trying to figure out, how do I tell whether I was able to make those changes happen?
And I dropped a link to that in the chat.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. The last thing I want to talk to you about, and this is just sort of a side note, and I'm sorry if it's not directly applicable to you, but I did want to make sure we mentioned it. For organizations that are headquartered in the US or have a 501c3 incorporation in the US, the data that you gather about outcomes can be shared through guidestar.org. And we've talked about GuideStar before. It is unfortunately not available for organizations in Mexico yet because of the way the law goes and the way that we get information about different nonprofits. We can't get information on all the nonprofits in Mexico. But I did want to make sure that if you are in the United States and you haven't gone on to guidestar.org and updated your information there, because all of the nonprofits incorporated in the United States are on guidestar.org. If you haven't yet done that, I'd encourage you to do it. It's very easy to do, and I'm kind of breezing through these slides. But the idea is it's a great place to share information about your outcomes to other organizations in the United States. It just gives you a place to save them and to store them. Now, I will say that in the future, this is expanding. Every year it gets more comprehensive and more expansive. The idea being that eventually we go beyond the borders. Eventually we go beyond who we list in our guidestar.org database. There's been a movement in the next year probably for adding organizations that have fiscal sponsors to be listed. So you will see that this becomes potentially, even if it's not something that you can do right now, it is something that you should have on your radar as a potential future thing to do. We give you assistance in getting seals of transparency and sharing information and comparing different results with other organizations. But don't worry about it if you can't do it right now. If you're in Mexico and you're learning all the other stuff that Lori and I talked about is completely the same no matter where you are on the planet in terms of measuring. I do want to find out if there are any final questions or questions that we didn't get to in the chat to help understand. Anything that anybody shared? I'm going to look back in sort of some of the chat here and see if there's anything that I missed. And if
Also,
not,
I wanted to, I'm gonna drop a link in, Dave, something else, with GuideStar, seals that you could still benefit everyone is the common results catalog.
yeah, that's true.
And that's, it's for people who earn a platinum seal, but the thing about the common results catalog is that it helps you find metrics to demonstrate your impact. And it's arranged by industries. So for example, if you're in direct services, then they say, you know, what some of the metrics you would look at is the number of clients served, the number of facilities improved, number of health outcomes improved. So it kind of gives you a general idea about how you would measure and evaluate. So I am going to put that link in the chat.
And just because I breezed so quickly through that, I do want to clarify. Maria is asking if when you talk about the seals, it referred how they use their money. It's not specifically related to funding. It's about how much information you share about your own organization. So if you're a US organization and you go on to guidestar.org, what we ask you to do is earn seals in order to communicate more information about yourself, that your organization, that is not available just from IRS records. So it's sharing contact information, sharing program information, financials, and finally outcomes and measurement information. It's totally free for any organizations in the United States. It's totally free. So, and the benefits from getting the seals are more awareness by funders about who is out there. It's used by donor advised fund managers. It's used by organizations in the United States that are looking to decide who gets gifts, but that are not asking for open applications. So there's no way to really write and ask for money from them, but they are looking, and they have donor advised fund managing companies and other companies like Facebook, for example. Facebook uses GuideStar information to share information about fundraising. Laura is mentioning one thing that I definitely should talk about, and that is what we've just talked about here and what we have gone through. That entire logic model idea is something that fits very clearly into any grant proposal. One of the things that is asked for by just about any funder is give us a clear sense of why we should invest in your organization. Tell us about your project. And sometimes it's as simple as that. Just tell us about your project. Tell us about what you are going to do to address this need you've identified. So you see there's a lot of hungry people in the community. What specifically are you going to do? You might find that a little daunting because the funder will say, you know, tell me how your program makes a difference. Well,
and Dave, 1 minute, could I just, if you could let me share, I'm gonna put up the slide that shows the logic model in context
good. I was
of the
hoping that,
proposal.
I was hoping that you would do that.
Yeah, okay. So if you could
It
just
fits
stop
very
your
clearly
share.
into a proposal, and Lori is going to share. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we can share this slide.
Okay.
And the slide that she's going to show you is simply how it fits within a typical grant proposal. And the thing about the logic model is you may not think about it that way, but here's the story that you're telling. Here's the need that we're responding to. Here's the issue. Here's what we need in order to do something about that. Here's the activities we're planning. Here's what's going to happen because of those activities. And here are the changes that are going to go on in the community. All of those things are the essentials of a narrative section of a grant proposal. So moving that direction with us and including outcomes, particularly the specific changes you're making in the community, are absolutely necessary for sharing this information. And Lori, I can only see the Spanish language screen at the moment.
Oh, if you go up to the top to view options and then click on screens.
Oh, there you go. Okay,
Yeah,
that's what you were. We're getting good at this now. It's only been a few years. Now we know.
Right. Now we know what we're doing.
Lori, do you want to talk about this?
Yeah, so this is from one of our proposal writing classes, and this shows you exactly how the logic model corresponds. So these are the sections of the proposal. that we talk about. First up here is that statement of need. Again, everything flows from that, not only the proposal, but both the logic model. What is the need that you are serving in your community, and what is the scope of that need, and how are you proposing to meet it? So that's a large part of the proposal right there. And then, as you'll see, a lot of the logic model goes into the project descriptions. These are some of the common things that a funder is going to ask you about. What are your goals? Objectives is another way of saying that. So objectives are more or less the short-term outcomes. In other words, those immediate results from your program. Okay, if you're a health program and you say we're providing vaccines for children. Okay, so that's a short-term outcome. That's your objective. That's what you do every day. You are providing vaccines. You're seeing that the children are vaccinated to keep them from becoming sick. That's a short-term outcome. Again, outcomes, when these are terms that are used interchangeably. Usually objectives corresponds to shorter term outcomes, whereas a lot of times when funders are talking about outcomes, they're talking about more of those mid to long-term outcomes. So again, this is, it varies for funders, but this is some of the language you're going to hear on grant applications. Tell us about your results. Tell us what are your objectives and how have you met them? That's how they're going to frame it. And this is roughly how it corresponds to the logic model. Methods, how are you going to achieve this? This is all about your activities and your outputs. How are we going to achieve seeing that these kids don't go into the juvenile justice system? We're going to pair them with mentors, and we're going to provide group activities for them once a month for the duration of the school year. Okay, those are some activities and outputs, and that's really what your methods are. Another way to say that is just a program description. As I said, the programs that you're putting on, those are all about your everyday activities. Staffing is something else they're going to ask you about in that project description. How are you, what are the personnel needs? And that's an input. That's something you have to pay for, or you have to have volunteers for. So staffing is the people who work for the organization who are monitoring or overseeing the volunteers, and then volunteers might be another input when it comes to staffing. Now partnerships, we mentioned again, inputs are often monetary, but they can also be non-monetary. In other words, what do you need for this program? Well, say how are you gonna find the kids for the mentees? Maybe you're going to partner with local public schools or local churches to find out where are some children that, would benefit possibly from this mentorship program. So partnerships is an input. It could be an activity if you have to, find partners, or it could be an output. But again, it's something you need to put your program on. And when it comes to partnerships, funders, they love collaboration. They love to know that your organization is not trying to operate in a vacuum, but is working with other organizations to make a difference. You're not necessarily duplicating efforts. So partnerships comes in there. And then evaluation, which is what Dave just got through talking about. That's part of your project description, because they're not only going to want to know what you're doing, but how you plan on evaluating what you're doing. In other words, what are your metrics for success? And as I said, you set those metrics. They don't set them, you set them. You decide what success looks like and how you're going to measure it. And that's where the evaluation comes in.
I think that, and this is, by the way, this slide is not in the deck, but we are going to share it.
No, I can share it. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll share it with everyone so that you do get it. The other two things that I put in the links, which you already should have available to download, is the completable blank logic model form. I think it would be a good exercise for everyone. We didn't have you do it on here because we can't really make it interactive, but it is a good exercise for everyone to download the logic model form and to take one of your programs that you were looking to get funding for and work it through in the logic model. Can you answer all the different spaces? The other thing that's part of the handout is a blank one, but also one that's been completed so that you can see how it works and you can see what you would put in to each of the different elements. And I'll just say again that the Candid Learning site has many examples of full proposals and other things that, if you're not sure how this works, take a look at those full proposals and see if you yourself can pull out from what you see all of this. And Lori is bringing up on the website here the sample documents section from our Candid Learning site. And she's going to put the link, I believe, in the chat so that you can also get to this if you want to download any of these materials. Do we have any other questions that are coming in related to this? And yes, Lori has put the sample documents in. All right. Well, Melora, do you have anything else that you want to add or anything else you'd like us to address? We're happy to do it. You know, we're ending a little bit early, but we are available for you to ask questions of too. Yes, and I think Melora is going to add some information about some other upcoming webinars. I'm going to put Lori's and my email addresses in the chat just so you can contact us if you have any questions about what we talked about.
Yes, David, thank you very much. I just want to share the dates for the upcoming Candid webinars. And it's going to be on the next one, strategies for finding new donors, estrategias para encontrar nuevos donantes, on the 16th of November. And the next one in December, on December 7th, 8 steps for cultivating relationships with individual donors. And as people register to this webinar, you're gonna be getting an invitation to join these new webinars, and also in our newsletters and other social media, you can find out about our upcoming programs and webinars. Thank you.
And we just had one more question that popped up in there about these two. I know that we had people asking about finding new donors and wanting to identify where to find them. And we'll be definitely exploring all the different avenues for that. And Mayra is saying that in Mexico, the donations are not as deductible from taxes as they used to be. That's true in the United States as well. They've changed the tax law in such a way that that is often not the driving force for donations, is the tax deductibility. It's required for foundations, but it's not necessarily what's driving the logic behind giving. And that's what we'll explore in the next presentation.
Yeah, particularly for individual donors. Institutions are kind of bound by that to support only 501c3s. But yes, when it comes to individual donors, which are a different resource, which the next 2 classes will talk about, yeah, that tax deductibility is not always the key thing.
Well, if we have no more questions or anything else we want to add on, thank you so much for joining today. I hope this was useful. Hope you watched the recording if you didn't see the whole thing. And any last words of wisdom, Lori?
That's a tough one. No last words. Can't think of anything. But yeah, like I said, the logic model, it's a useful exercise, even if, as I said, you don't necessarily share it with everyone. I just think it's a very useful thing for an organization to go through, just for your own sakes.
And you will find a foundation someday. You will be asked to share a logic model, and it will be such a relief because you will know.
I have one right here.
Exactly. All right. Well, everybody have a fantastic day, and we will see you again next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Lori. Thank you,
my Lord,
David.
Salif and Andy.
Thank you
Thank
very
you
much.
all. And Melissa. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all.
Mhm.
Bye-bye.